Today's story is about a rather unusual profession. The protagonist, Dolby, is a veterinarian. He currently works as a veterinarian, and he chose this profession because he truly loves animals and cares deeply about them. He studied incredibly hard to pursue the career he wanted. In South Korea, veterinarians also have an alternative form of military service, similar to how doctors can serve as military doctors or public health doctors instead of completing regular military service. There is a system called the Public Animal Disease Control Veterinarian Program. Dolby's friend was assigned to this program and served in place of regular military service. But, in a way, it was a heartbreaking assignment. He was sent to a shelter for abandoned animals, or more specifically, to a facility where animals infected with serious diseases were euthanized. He had chosen to become a veterinarian because he loved animals so much. But somehow, one of his main duties became euthanizing them. He suffered tremendously during that period. He said that filling the syringe with the lethal solution was incredibly difficult. His hands would tremble. The entire process was emotionally devastating. He struggled with tremendous guilt. After completing his service, he eventually opened his own veterinary clinic. Working at an animal hospital brought him a great deal of fulfillment. Being able to treat sick animals and help them recover gave him a genuine sense of purpose. But he apparently couldn't stop thinking about the animals he had personally been forced to send away. Those memories continued to weigh heavily on his heart. Eventually, Dolby began volunteering at an abandoned dog rescue shelter. He wanted to somehow atone for the animals he had been forced to send away. At the same time, he wanted to use the skills he had developed as a veterinarian to help animals that were sick and in need. With those thoughts in mind, he began volunteering at abandoned dog shelters. As Dolby continued volunteering at different places, he started running into the same man quite often. For convenience, let's call him Chulsu. Chulsu was in his early 40s. He was apparently the kind of person who always walked around with a genuinely kind smile on his face. He was a really good person. He never hesitated to do the jobs other people avoided, cleaning up dog waste, carrying heavy things, or taking care of aggressive dogs, and he always did it with a smile. He genuinely cared about the animals. So naturally, when two people who both loved animals so much met each other, they became close very quickly. Chulsu would warmly greet Dolby. "Oh, our veterinarian is here. Thanks to you, these animals are really being treated like royalty. Thank you so much." He was always friendly and kind. He would even bring Dolby drinks and take care of him. That was how Dolby and Chulsu gradually became close. Most of the time, Chulsu was just a simple, kind-hearted older man from the countryside. But there were moments when something about Chulsu changed. His eyes would suddenly become different. When did this happen? Whenever Chulsu saw animals brought to the shelter after being mistreated by their owners, he would become unbelievably angry. Among them were animals that had suffered severe trauma, animals that had been left in neglectful and cruel conditions, animals that had suffered serious injuries, and even animals that were physically scarred. Whenever he saw them, something almost frightening would appear in his eyes. Who could do something like this? How could a person be so cruel to an animal? This isn't a human being. They aren't human. They deserve to face consequences for what they've done. He would continue cursing the people responsible. Now, of course, anyone would be angry when they saw an animal that had been abused. But as people are exposed to such things repeatedly, they can sometimes become emotionally numb. They might say, "That's terrible. What a poor thing." But it's not easy to react with the same intense rage every single time. Yet Chulsu was different. Every time he saw an animal in pain, it seemed as if something far beyond simple anger or aggression would emerge from his eyes. According to Dolby, there was something about the way Chulsu looked at those animals that felt deeply unsettling. After some time had passed, Chulsu began saying, "I really want to take these sick animals home with me. I want to raise them myself." Some of you may already know this, but there are limits on how many animals a person can adopt from a shelter. In South Korea, a person is generally limited to adopting up to 3 animals from certain shelters, partly to prevent them from being abandoned again. But Chulsu had already adopted 3 dogs, so Dolby asked him, "Then you can't take any more of them home, right? Is that why you come here so often?" Chulsu replied, "No, that's not the reason. Actually, I bring abandoned dogs to my own place and take care of them. I feed them, and I even built some kennels behind the farmland where I work. I raise them there. But since I'm doing everything alone, it costs quite a bit of money. So I volunteer here because I want to help even more of these animals." Dolby thought, "That's really admirable. You're doing something truly wonderful. I'm a veterinarian, so I might be able to come and help from time to time. Call me whenever you need help." Chulsu replied, "I'd really appreciate that. Thank you so much." Some time passed. Then one day, Dolby received a call from Chulsu. "Dolby, I have a few animals that I'm taking care of, and some of them are in pretty bad condition. If you have time, could you come take a look at them, like we talked about before?" Dolby readily agreed. "Of course, I'll come." He gathered some medicine and other supplies he thought might be necessary, then headed over. Chulsu lived in a quiet rural village about 30 minutes by car from where Dolby lived. Dolby drove out into the countryside. Even after reaching the village, Chulsu's home was located a little farther away from the main residential area. There was a fenced-off area with kennels. Since there were so many dogs, there was a lot of noise and smell, so Chulsu had apparently built a separate facility for them, away from the village. When Dolby arrived, he found several greenhouses and a few containers connected together. The entire area was surrounded by green metal fencing, just like a small abandoned dog shelter. Despite the rural location, the environment was surprisingly well maintained. It was actually quite nice. The dogs, however, seemed weak. Dolby noticed that Chulsu had food and supplies, and it looked like he had genuinely been doing his best to care for them. Still, the dog's overall condition looked quite poor. Dolby thought, "So this really is what Chulsu has been telling me about. He brings in sick and abandoned animals and takes care of them here." So he began examining the dogs. As a veterinarian, when examining an animal, especially while giving an injection, it's natural to ask things like, "Are you okay? Does our dog seem all right? Is our little one doing okay?" Those are usually the first things veterinarians ask while treating an animal. But Chulsu kept asking questions. What kind of injection is that? What medicine is it? What does it do? Does it hurt the dogs a lot? He kept asking about every detail. So Dolby thought, he really must care about these dogs. If he's this concerned about what kind of medicine they're receiving, he must truly love them. Dolby carefully explained everything. This medicine has a sedative effect. It isn't primarily for pain. It works more like this. After finishing the examinations, Dolby and Chulsu sat down together, lit a cigarette, and talked for a while. Then Chulsu asked, "Dolby, how did you end up doing this kind of work? How did you start volunteering here?" And Dolby began telling him his story. Dolby explained that when he was serving as a public health veterinarian, he had been involved in euthanasia and other similar duties. He said that the experience had been so heartbreaking that it eventually motivated him to start volunteering and helping abandoned animals. Chulsu listened sympathetically. "So veterinarians really struggle with euthanasia that much? Was it difficult for you?" Then he asked, "But when an animal is given an euthanasia injection, does it really die peacefully without feeling any pain at all?" Dolby replied, "Well, not exactly. Since the medication ultimately stops the heart, there can be some degree of pain involved. Normally, that would have been the end of the conversation. It was already a difficult and heartbreaking subject, but Chulsu kept asking questions. He began bringing up different methods used when animals are put down, comparing them to how criminals might be executed. What about this method? What about that method? What would an animal feel in that situation? He kept returning to the subject of euthanasia. But from a veterinarian's perspective, there was no way to know exactly what death felt like. No one who had died could come back and explain the pain they had experienced. So Dolby couldn't give him a definitive answer. He simply said that, as far as people could determine, there was probably a method that would cause the least suffering. Then he tried to steer the conversation toward another subject. As they were leaving, Dolby noticed several containers on the property. "Hey, Chulsu, what are those containers? Do you sleep in them? Do you actually live there?" Chulsu replied, "Oh, those? They're just farm huts. I have a few of them here. Since this is the countryside, I also keep things like agricultural chemicals here. It's basically just a storage shed." But as Dolby casually glanced inside while walking past, something felt strange. For a simple agricultural chemical storage shed, it looked oddly like a laboratory. There were containers that looked as though they were designed to hold chemicals or medicine. Dolby thought, "What's that about? Maybe there's some reason for it." But he didn't think much more of it, and eventually left. For the next several months, they continued seeing each other from time to time. Dolby had grown attached to the animals and naturally became interested in how they were doing, so he visited several more times. Some of the dogs had actually recovered and become healthy again. Others had deteriorated to the point where Dolby thought, this one may not have much time left, so he continued going back and forth, checking on the animals. Then, several months later, Dolby received a call from the police. Dolby was in the middle of treating a patient when an unfamiliar number suddenly called. He answered, "Hello? Are you calling to make an appointment?" But the person on the other end said, "This is Detective from the Violent Crimes Division of Police Station. Am I speaking with Kim Dolby?" Dolby was immediately confused. The detective continued, "We need to speak with you as a witness regarding a particular case. If you have some time, we'd appreciate it if you could come in for an interview." But these days, phone scams are so common that Dolby immediately became suspicious. He thought, this sounds exactly like a voice phishing scam. So he hung up. Don't try to scam me. And just like that, the call ended. Not long afterward, the detective came to Dolby's clinic in person. Apparently, the detective had realized that Dolby had suspected the call was a scam. The detective showed him his police identification and explained, "We really do need to speak with you as a witness regarding an ongoing case. If you have time, we'd appreciate it if you could come with us to the police station. You can also drive there in your own car if you prefer." Dolby understood and agreed to go. For someone who has never been questioned by the police before, even a simple witness interview can be intimidating. Dolby couldn't help thinking, did I do something wrong? Why do the police want to talk to me? He carefully went to the station and began the witness interview. Then suddenly, the detective placed a photograph in front of him. It was a photograph of Chulsu. "Do you know this man? Do you know Kim Chulsu?" Dolby immediately replied, "Yes, I do. We volunteer together. He's a really good older friend. Did something happen to him?" At that point, Dolby was worried that something bad might have happened to Chulsu. He never once imagined that Chulsu himself could be involved in something criminal. Chulsu had always seemed like such a kind and caring person, but the detective then said, "Kim Chulsu was arrested 2 days ago on suspicion of attempted murder, and we found a large number of fingerprints belonging to you inside his home. So we called you in as a witness to clarify the situation." Technically, Dolby had been called in as a witness, but from the investigators' perspective, it was also possible that they were considering whether he might have been involved as an accomplice. When Dolby heard the full story, he finally understood what had happened. In the rural village where Chulsu lived, many elderly residents kept dogs in their yards. One day, while walking past a house, Chulsu witnessed an elderly man mistreating his dog. The dog was a white Jindo, commonly known as a Bayekgu. The man was acting aggressively toward the animal because it was not obeying him. Chulsu witnessed the entire scene. Shortly after, he returned to his home and acquired a harmful substance. He then secretly entered the elderly man's residence and introduced the substance into the man's food. Fortunately, the man's wife was about to dine with him. She noticed something unusual about the situation and immediately contacted emergency services. While the man's life was not in danger, his health had been compromised. At the hospital, medical professionals confirmed that he had ingested a harmful substance. The police launched an investigation into the incident. At first, they suspected the wife, as she had been preparing the meal. However, the investigation found no evidence of her involvement. The authorities then began reviewing nearby security footage and vehicle dashcam recordings. Eventually, they discovered footage of Chulsu entering the man's home, which led them to focus their investigation on him. As the inquiry deepened, the truth began to emerge. What they uncovered was genuinely horrifying. Inside the room that Dolby had previously mistaken for a laboratory, investigators reportedly discovered a collection of over 100 different medical items and chemical supplies. Among these were various specialized products often used in animal care. Most unsettling, however, was the discovery of medication packets that had been prescribed by the very veterinary clinic Dolby himself had visited, suggesting Chulsu had been meticulously tracking those connections. Furthermore, they uncovered a vast array of agricultural supplies and other potent compounds that could be dangerous if handled improperly. The investigation took a much darker turn when authorities received a tip from a local resident who had observed suspicious activity near the kennels Chulsu frequented. Upon searching the area, they reportedly discovered a deeply disturbing sight that confirmed their worst suspicions about Chulsu's true activities. The investigators slammed the file onto the table. "Explain yourself," they demanded. "Why did you decide who gets to survive and who doesn't? And that old man, what gave you the right to choose his fate?" Chulsu stared back with unnerving, glass-like composure. "You speak as if I have violated a law," he whispered, a faint, empty smile touching his lips. "I simply corrected the imbalances in nature. I was not causing an end. I was perfecting a cycle." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a sharp, clinical tone. "I am a researcher. I am a pioneer of a necessary truth." The investigators recoiled, disgusted by his detachment. "And the man? Was that also part of your perfect cycle?" Chulsu's eyes darkened with a sudden icy fervor. "Those who ignore the sanctity of life are hollow shells. They are parasites that corrupt the world. I am merely the instrument of a grand design. A higher authority governs my hands. I gifted those others a permanent peace, and I granted that man the exact same silence he forced upon them. I balanced the scales." He sat back, his expression radiating a terrifying sense of righteousness. "I have committed no transgression. I have only served the truth." He continued to offer these justifications with a chilling, absolute certainty, revealing a mind completely unmoored from the world of the living. Chulsu even wrote Dolby a letter. In it, he reportedly wrote something like, "I wasn't able to complete everything I was supposed to do. I was following the gifts given to me by the gods of the animals. But you, Dolby, truly seem to love animals. I want you to carry on what I started and finish creating them. You're a veterinarian. It would be easier for you to obtain the medicines and chemicals you need." It was as if Chulsu was asking Dolby to continue the criminal acts he had started. Afterward, Chulsu was sent to a detention center while awaiting trial. The case occurred in 2023. While in detention, Chulsu reportedly made a tragic decision and took his own life. Even in his final note, he reportedly wrote, "Death is not death. Death is salvation. I am an angel who gives the gift of salvation. When I go to the afterlife, the animals I saved will come to take me away." And with those words, he left this world. The strange thing is that this case was never reported in the news. It never became a major media story, and I only heard about it because I knew someone connected to Dolby. As I listened to the story, I couldn't help thinking, there must be so many horrifying stories like this that never make it into the news.